Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jono White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jono White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up, to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to episode 15 of the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jono White, founder and principal consultant of Clarity. And today's guest is Rajit Kamal. Rajit is the worldwide president, sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction for Johnson & Johnson. And this part of the business, the sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction business at Johnson & Johnson, that's part of DePuy Synthes, He's also a member of the Global DePuy Synthes leadership team, the management board for which is a $9 billion global orthopedic business. Wow. I can't wait to ask more about this because I'm really interested in this industry. But in this role, Rajit has end-to-end responsibility for the $1 billion diversified sports and shoulder reconstruction business. Rajit has been with Johnson & Johnson since 2008 and has worked in a variety of commercial roles. He has diversified experience and has worked across multiple businesses, regions, and functions. Rajit is known for his people and leadership skills, strategic thinking, commercial acumen, and collaboration skills. Rajit started his career with Procter Gamble in manufacturing, supply chain, and demand planning. He has worked as a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group and Innosight before joining Johnson & Johnson. He holds a BS in chemical engineering with distinction from Indian Institute of Technology, an MS in chemical engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, an MBA from Harvard Business School, and an MS in technology management from Columbia University. Welcome, Rajit, and thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Jono. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this conversation because I have to be honest, the area that you work in is an area that I don't really know much about. So, and I'm guessing it'll probably be the same for a lot of listeners. So, I'm really going to be leaning in and I know that the conversation we have about leadership, particularly with the context you're leading in at the moment, I'm going to find very fascinating. But just for context, I unpacked a little bit there in the bio, but tell us about the role you're in at the moment with DePuy Synthes as part of Johnson & Johnson, and yeah, your role, what your team looks like, what your locations look like in terms of it, like the global presence. Yeah, tell us a bit about the context you're leading in right now, Rajit.
Absolutely, Jono. So I lead our sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction business. So think about it this way. A lot of people play sports. If you're playing soccer, say, for example, you might break your ACL or you might tear one of the ligaments. We provide products that repair those, that restore those ligaments. So we provide products that does that. You might have pain in the knee because you have osteoarthritis. We have products that helps you manage the pain. We also have products to replace shoulder. As we all get older, we have osteoarthritis in our shoulder joint. A time comes when you are not able to raise your hand, and we provide products to replace the shoulder joint. So, we say that we are in the business of keeping people moving. And my focus area is shoulder reconstruction and sports medicine. But as DePuy Synthes, which is part of Johnson and Johnson, we provide products across orthopedics, so hip replacement, knee replacement, trauma. If you break your bones, we have products to fix that. Spine. So we provide all sorts of products to be able to take care of any orthopedic, or we call it musculoskeletal issues that patients might have. I really enjoy that because I have seen the benefits our products make to lives of people around the world. The joy of seeing somebody getting back to activity they love. My own mother, she passed away a couple of months back, but she had both her knees replaced. And at that time, I was actually working in our knee replacement business. And I have seen the difference it made to her life. She got her mobility back. She was able to move around. Uh, and that makes a big difference. So I enjoy this business because of the difference we can make to lives of people around the world. In terms of my team, look, I am responsible for end-to-end business for our sports medicine and shoulder reconstruction. I work with colleagues around the world. I work with our cross-functional colleagues, with the goal to make sure we are bringing the best products to our patients, and we are working with our teams to be able to deliver that, get access to hospitals, get access to surgeons, and drive those products, ultimately touching patients' lives around the world.
Yeah, incredible. And I'm sorry to hear about your mother passing away in the past couple of months. But I appreciate you sharing that beautiful story. I think that's a very special opportunity you've had to see the product that you're part of and actually firsthand making a difference in your mother's life through knee reconstructions. That must have been a very powerful
I can't think of anything more powerful, actually, in terms of really seeing the purpose of what you're doing come to life. So, no, I appreciate you sharing
Oh,
that story.
absolutely.
Mm.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think, the satisfaction you get, and in my role, whenever I hear patient stories, and everybody has a family or a friend. Sometimes when we do town halls, we ask people, raise your hand if you know somebody in your family who has had an orthopedic procedure, and invariably, a lot of people raise their hands, right?
That's
So
right.
I think that is what drives us. That is what is keeps us going every day. So yeah, seeing my own mother benefit from that has been truly satisfying.
Yeah, wonderful, Rajit. Well, I'm really interested to hear about your story of, and I love reading out your bio because you have such a varied and diverse path. I can just hear from the places you've studied and from the different areas you've worked. So feel free to share as much as you'd like. I really love, and I know listeners love hearing the stories of leaders like yourself who are doing, incredible things in a role like you're in. So tell us the story of Rajit.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonah. So look, I grew up in India. I grew up in a small town in India, not one of the big cities. And at the age of 8, when I was in grade 3, I actually went to a boarding school. I went to a boarding school because the place where I was growing up at that time did not have very good schools, and my parents really wanted me to get a good education, which I'm very, very grateful for. Look,
Mm.
at such a young age, staying away from your parents, my boarding school was like 24-hour train journey from where my parents lived. And in those days, there were no emails, there were no cell phones, right? So you were
Yeah.
literally just separated and away from your parents. So that was harder in the beginning, but looking back, I really appreciate because that set the foundation for me, Jono. India, if you know about India, is a very diverse country. We have
Mm.
mix of cultures, we have mix of languages, mix of customs, and that was truly represented in the boarding school I was in. And I grew up with people who were different than me, and I learned about finding common ground. I learned about working with people, collaboration. I learned that you have to work with others. You can't do things alone. And in boarding school, we leaned on each other.
Mm.
I learned the importance of building healthy, productive relationships. I also learned the importance of being independent. Learned the importance of making sure that you are able to make a decision and move forward with. So I thought the boarding school set the right foundation for me, and I'm
Mm.
very grateful for that experience. After that, I went to engineering school and again had a terrific experience. Indian Institute of Technology, very fine institutions. The academic rigor is very high,
Yes.
but again, I think it set the good foundation in terms of analytical skills. And while I was studying there, I was fascinated by the research that happens in graduate schools in the United States.
Mm.
And at that time, I wanted to be a professor. So actually, after my undergraduate, I applied in a PhD program and came to Georgia Tech, actually in a PhD program in chemical engineering. And while I was doing my research, I was actually doing a research with a company in Atlanta where Georgia Tech is based. And while working at that company, that was my first exposure to an industry, to how people work in industry. And I got fascinated by that. And I went back to my advisor and said, why don't I work in industry for a couple of years and then make a call whether I want to be in academia or I want to be in industry? And he said, fine, get your master's, go and work, and then if you want to come back, you can always come back. And that's how I joined Procter and Gamble. P&G was a great experience. I actually worked in a very small town in South Georgia, which is about 3 hours south of Atlanta. It's a very
Mm.
blue collar town. We had manufacturing plants, different companies had manufacturing plants. And I was the only Indian in that town. You couldn't be that different than the population. And I was
Wow.
actually managing people on the factory floor. And these were the people who had high school education, obviously grew up in that town in Georgia, spoke with a very different accent. I obviously had an Indian accent. I was, for some of them, I was their kids' age. Uh, on the surface, nothing could have been different, John. And that taught me important lessons in leadership because 3 months in, I still remember today, I walked into the control room. We used to have this machine, and the machine was down. We had a quality issue, and I walked in. I used to come in the morning for my, as a manager, I used to come in the morning, and people were working night shifts. And I asked one of the operators, what happened, and they were explaining to me, and I said, this happened last week as well, and why did we repeat the mistake? And I remember she just snapped and said, "You are the worst manager I have ever worked with. I just don't know why people hire people like you." And just walked out of the control room. And she said that in front of like 10 people. And I was like,
Wow.
what did I do? I was doing my job. So I went to my manager and I said, "Hey, I think this is an unacceptable behavior." And he sat me down and he said, "How much effort have you made to get to know these people? Have you ever worked night shifts? Have you ever walked on the factory floor?" And and we used to make paper, and paper, if you walk on a paper machine, you will be like, get dirty, right? And he said,
Mm,
"I see you come to your control room. I see you ask questions, but I've never seen you make an effort to get to know who they are. I've never
mm,
seen an effort for them to get to know you, right? Leadership is not positional authority. If you just think
mm,
just because you are the manager and they will listen to you and follow you, that is not how it works, right? You have to build credibility, you have to build trust, you have to get to know them, and
yes.
you have to make that effort, right? And he said, "I want you to spend, and he said, look, I'm going to give you another 6 months. And look, you are a smart engineer. Maybe you are not suited for being a leader, and that is fine. Everybody has a different role. But he said, I'm going to give you 6 months. I'll give you a chance. You turn this around, you continue in this role. If not, I will find you another role. Your job is not at risk, but I just want to make sure that, we find you the right fit." And that
Mm,
was a wake up call, John. It was a wake up call for me. And I did turn things around in 6 months. I worked night shifts. I spent time getting to know them. I was very vulnerable. I was very open. I shared who I was. And what you realize is that on the surface, we couldn't be any different. We looked different. We spoke differently. We had different cultures, different background. Nothing was similar, right?
mm,
Um, but we found things in common. End of the day, we care about family. End of the day, we care about things that are basic human, right? And I found that once they saw me doing the things they were doing, once they saw me that I genuinely care about their well-being, I genuinely care about what they do, and I shared about my family. We all have hopes, aspirations that are not that different. Everybody
mm,
wants to be happy. Everybody wants to and you find those things in common, and the relationships that I built exist till today. Thanks to Facebook, I'm connected with a lot of them. But
mhm,
that experience taught me a very important lesson. And that lesson is get to know people and
mm,
let them get to know you, right?
yes.
Don't rely on positional authority. You got to build that relationships, right? So, and then, while at Procter and Gamble, Jono, I got very exposed to marketing. P&G is a very marketing driven organization.
Yep.
And I thought, why don't I go and get a business education? I was very much an engineer. So I went to Harvard Business School, which again was a transformational experience for me. I was very much an engineer. And, Harvard Business School just opened my eyes to so many things. But the most importantly, what it opened my eyes to was it is not about my analytical skills. It's about softer skills that matter. It's about asking the right questions, not having all the right answers.
Mm,
It's about work, in our classrooms, Jono, it is all case discussion. There is no lectures. And it is fascinating. Till then, I had been in classrooms where everybody had background in science and math, right?
yes.
All of a sudden in Harvard Business School, you have people with background in liberal arts, people who were doctors, people who were
Yeah.
in army, people who were in film, in entertainment. It's like all sorts of background, and we had people from 75 different countries.
Wow.
And it is fascinating, Jono, when somebody asks a question, people based on their background will have a different perspective, and it just opened my eyes on you don't always have the right answer, and having diversity of thought is so important,
Mm,
because same issue but people can have different views based on what your background is, what your experience is, right? And that really taught me a very important lesson in leadership, which is about ensuring that you get diverse viewpoints before you arrive at a decision, especially if it's a high stakes decision, right?
Mm.
And don't assume that you know the right answer, right? And
Mm-hmm.
as a leader, you have to focus on asking the right questions. Not even if you know the answer, it is very
Mm-hmm.
important to make sure you're focusing on asking the right questions. So again, Harvard Business School was a great experience for me. At least for me, I felt it was a transformational experience. And then I would join Boston Consulting Group, great organization, and that was a continuation of my learning, problem
Mm.
solving. How do you interact with, see, how do you influence people, how do you, and I think that just was a great continuation. And then I joined Johnson and Johnson. It's almost 14 years back, in our
Yeah.
orthopedic division. And J&J is a great organization. I've really enjoyed my time. I'm very grateful for all the opportunities I have got here. And I have gone through multiple commercial roles, different functions. I've worked in different regions. And J&J just has been a great organization. I love the mission. We strive to make a difference in lives of people around the world. We are driven by our credo.
Mm.
Our credo says that patients come first and shareholders come last, right?
Yeah.
If you take care of the patients, the employees, and the community, shareholders come later, right? And I think that's the right way to think about it, right? So
Yeah.
I think the value of the organization aligns, the mission of the organization aligns, and here I am 14 years later, and very very grateful for all the opportunities I have got. So maybe a longer answer than you were expecting, Jono, but this has been my journey.
No, that was perfect. That was a wonderful insight, and I really appreciated you sharing vulnerably around your time when you were in that management role, and that employee
Yeah.
spoke up, and your manager sat you down. I think that was just a yeah. I think there'll be a lot of leaders around the world listening to that, nodding, going, "Yes, I remember when I had." Something similar, either when I was the employee or when I was the manager, or when I had that aha moment of, okay. For me, it was that I remember thinking that if I just did my role really well, everyone would follow. I actually just didn't realize there was this, how intentional a leader needs to be to actually grow their team, to build in the individuals that they're working with, and like you said, to build credibility. And that for me, I remember having a moment like that where I went, okay, I don't know how to do this, but I'd better learn how to do this because it's not what I thought it was.
Yeah, there's a very famous saying, and I don't know who said that, but it says, people don't care what you say till they know that you care, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's very telling, right? Unless people think that, you care about, genuinely care about, and that does not mean you cannot hold them accountable. That does not mean you cannot have a difficult conversation. But unless people feel that you are coming from a position where, you are genuinely care about them, you will never get the kind of coordination and teamwork, and it becomes really hard to be a leader. So building credibility is very very important, and being authentic, right, is very very
Yes.
important.
Let me ask you a question that came to mind when you were sharing your story, and it's a simple question, but you made this wonderful point around getting to know people, and it sounds so simple, but it's so true. I couldn't agree more. And I'm just interested to know, say there's a leader out there listening, going, "Oh, this is something I really need to do better at." What are some practical ways that you've found as a leader to really get to know the people you lead? I know it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of us, people are time poor, and what are some practical ways to really get to know and help the people you're leading to get to know you as a leader?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. First thing I would say is, when you are in a conversation, don't be distracted. So don't pick up your phone, right? Don't look at your text messages, right? So set your phone aside if you're having a one-on-one conversation, and put your undivided attention. That
Mm.
makes a difference, right? If
Yeah.
you are distracted, if you're checking your phone, it gives a signal that you are not really interested, or you don't value that conversation. So that's one, right? I would say, look into the eye, make an eye contact. The body language matters. Lean into the conversation, right? But then be curious. I am a curious person by nature, Jono, and I want to learn about people. I want to learn
Yes.
about their journey, learn about their experience, right? And you know, if you focus on that, people will warm up, right?
Yes.
And I think that is what I would advise is make sure that you're not being distracted. You give them the undivided attention, but then be curious about where they grew up, what kind of journey they have been on, what drives them, what motivates them, and then share about yourself as well. If people ask the question, what motivates you? If you're working with people, I think the questions I asked is, what's the best way of working? Are you a text person, a call person, email person? I think genuine curiosity about learning about people and ensuring that when you interact with them, they have your undivided attention, I think is very, very important. People say about ex-president Bill Clinton that when you speak with him, you get a feeling you are the most important person in the world, right?
Yes.
And I think that leaves an impression because he gives. I've never met him, I've never interacted with him, but I'm just the things that I read, and I'm assuming is because he probably focuses on you, gives you the undivided attention, is curious, learns, and I think those are the things that we should think about, right? How do we make sure that we genuinely listen to what people have to say? So that is one thing I would say for leaders. And then be vulnerable, be authentic. In this day and age, like we have been in Zoom calls over the last 18 months, right?
Yeah.
You get on a Zoom call and people can see your house. Be authentic. I think we should talk about challenges we face, right? And there's a power in being vulnerable. There's a power in being vulnerable. I think gone are the days when leaders have to be very, very strong, when leaders have to have everything in control. We all know nobody does, right? But there's a
True.
power in vulnerability, saying, hey, you know what? I just could not fix it, because then it makes you more human. And when it makes you more human, it makes you more relatable. And that is what the team is looking for, right? If people think that, I can't just relate to you, you are operating at a different level, you will never have that connection. So those are the things I would highlight, Joe.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea of being human and that people want relatable. They want connection. I think something that comes to mind for me is something I read in a book around how to be present. And I love how you mentioned that, because I think being present it speaks so much to the value of the person you're meeting with. And something really simple, which I know gets talked about a lot when it comes to mental health and mindfulness, but being present it can be really helpful to just stop. And when you're having that conversation and you've got 20 things going around in your head that you need to do, or coming up appointments, is just to be aware of your senses. And it sounds silly, but I've found it so helpful for me, if I'm sitting in a one-on-one, to think about what I can hear, and to focus on not just a person's voice, but think about what I can feel. Um, think about, like, there's something about stopping and focusing on your senses that is really helpful in my experience for being present and being, because then you're able to embrace that moment. And I love that you mentioned that, because I really do believe it's so easy to be thinking about 20 other things rather than being present with the person we're meeting with as a leader. And I think that does say so much to the person. If you can be present, like you said, I've heard that same sort of anecdote about Bill Clinton, and wow, it's amazing that so many. It must be. I think you're right. I think it's just the presence that he gives them, his full attention, which I think to a lot of us is something we can grow in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So for you, one of the things, I guess I'm interested in, as you look back at your time, you already shared this moment about when you were a manager, and you had that sort of wake up call. Are there any other specific moments in your career, maybe your time at Harvard in your studies, or maybe your time in India in your studies, or at Procter and Gamble, Boston Consulting Group? Are there any specific moments that also come to mind that really shaped you to become who you are today?
I think I have been very, very grateful, I would say, with all the experiences I have had. I think, going to boarding school has shaped my personality. As I said, it has helped me uh, understand the value of collaboration. It has helped me understand that you cannot alienate people and be, get things done, right? You have
Mm.
to find a way to work with others. And I couldn't have survived in a boarding school if I didn't get along with others, right?
Yes.
and get along with others who might be different. You have to find common ground, right? So I think that has been an experience, as an immigrant coming to the US, as a student with very limited income, right? And US is an amazing country. I think it's truly a melting pot where, I came and I feel like I have, never for a day I have felt that I was not born here. I'm a US citizen now, and I worked hard and I did the right thing. And working at P&G in my first role taught me important lessons in reaching out, connecting with people, respecting people. Harvard Business School again was a great experience. I think it taught me the value of diversity, but taught me the value of softer skills. Right,
Mm,
early in your career, hard skills might help you. If I'm an engineer, if I'm a very smart engineer, but as you become senior, it is not about having the right answers. It is not about being the smartest guy in the room. It is
mm,
about who can lead people, who can bring the best out of others, right? As they say, and I think this saying resonates very strongly with me. If you are with a manager, you might feel that they are the smartest people in the world. But if you're with a leader, you will feel you are the smartest person in the world, right? And I think
mm,
it's about how you make people feel in your presence, right? Do they feel like they can achieve more? A leader is somebody who enables people to achieve more than they think they can achieve, right? And that's the example of a great leadership, right? So again, how I learned softer skills in Harvard Business School. Boston Consulting Group taught me importance of problem solving, right? How do you influence? Because you work with senior corporate leaders, and then J&J has been just I have been very blessed with some of the opportunities I've got. I've worked in different regions, worked in different functions, and one of the things I have valued is that I'm a very curious person. I want to learn new things. As you can see, I have been to too many colleges. I always raise my hand for something which is new and different, because I feel like that will challenge me, and that will help me grow. And I've been very grateful with all the opportunities I've had at J&J, where I've had the opportunity to do different things and learn and grow myself. Right. So, look, I have led a business where we were going through a very difficult time. The business was declining. We were facing some external challenges, and that has taught me, as a leader, when the business is not doing well, how you show up matters, right? If I show up and I am really down, it's going to drag the whole team down. How do you show
mm,
up with the right level of energy? How do you have to be transparent. You can't lie and say everything is fine. You got to be transparent, but you also have to be optimistic that, look, if you do this and this, we will get through this. So I think that has been a very, very important lesson. Different roles teach you different things, but I would say just grateful for the journey I have had so far.
yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing that, and I think I've really enjoyed learning a little bit about your story. So when it comes to, I guess for you as a leader, when it comes to culture and diversity, I I still am just thinking back to you in this town in, was it Georgia? Um, that was,
Georgia,
I
yeah.
just can't think of a more. I just can't think of a. That must have been just such a such a formative experience, and so coming out of experiences like that, and then through things like your time at Harvard, what have you learned about culture and diversity? Once again, particularly for leaders out there who go, "Oh wow, it isn't even on my radar. Where can I start? Like, how do I do this better in terms of maybe embracing diversity that is on my team, leaning into that, building a culture of diversity for me and my organization? What would your advice be?"
Well, it starts with first realizing the value of diversity, right? And when I think about diversity, I think about diversity of thought, right? People who bring different perspectives to the table. I have
Mm,
seen that in action. I have seen that in action, and I have seen that when you have a conversation around a topic with people who come from different perspectives, you always end up with a better solution. So
yes.
it starts with realizing that, look, diversity is the right thing because it leads to better outcomes, right?
Hmm.
And diversity starts with, curiosity is important. You have to respect differences, right? And
Yes.
you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with that, right? We all grow with some preconceived notions. I think you have to dispel that. So I think, being open, being curious, but it starts with making sure that you see the value of diversity, and then you have to make an effort at it, right?
Yes.
Once you realize that, look, diversity is important, you got to think about, okay, what kind of diversity I want, and then you will have to make an effort. If you want to hire X type of people, you got to find out where they are, which schools they go to, right?
Yes.
But I think if you are a leader in an organization, and if you don't see the value in diversity, I would say, that is something to think through, because I truly feel that creating an environment, where people bring diverse perspectives, is a
Mm.
richer environment, is a better environment that leads to better outcomes. And leaders have to be intentional. You have to be intentional to be able to create a diverse culture, to be able to create a diverse workforce. And that is important, right? If everybody thinks along the same way, it leads to a suboptimal outcome.
I agree, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. I agree completely. It does lead to better outcomes, and it's worth investing in for leaders. 100%. What about
Yeah.
when it comes to building culture in a team? And I really love your focus on asking
Mhm.
questions and investing in people. Are there any things that you found particularly helpful? Any questions that you tend to come back to a lot when you're with a team? Also, I'm throwing a few different questions at you here, I know, but to do that, you have to have the space to meet with your team. So I'm interested to know how you do that. How often do you meet with your team? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, culture, when I think about culture, culture for me is how things get done in an organization, how information flows in an organization, who gets rewarded, who gets promoted. These are the
Mm,
elements of what defines a culture, right? Um, and a leader hence plays a very important role. If you are in a meeting, are you just listening to one person, or are you seeking out perspectives from everyone, right?
yes.
If you are in a meeting and somebody has a different viewpoint, do you shut them down or do you listen to them? If you are in a meeting and you said something and a data shows something different, are you willing to say, what, I was wrong there, or what, my thinking has evolved? Are you able to, so the actions of a leader sets the tone, sets the culture, right? Who are the people who are getting promoted? So I think uh, a leader plays, I think, a very important role in shaping the culture of an organization. And hence, as a leader, one has to have the responsibility and discipline on how you interact, what you say. All these things get people notice, right? So
Yes.
I think, for me, that those are the foundations of culture, and I feel leadership has an outsized impact on how you create a culture in an organization. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
then your question was, yep, and I'm sorry, I lost track of your question, Jonah. What was the next question? Um,
I wanted to know what I guess after all these years of leading different teams, what does your meeting schedule look like? How often do you meet one on one? How
sure.
often do you meet in the team? I think a lot of leaders are often wrestling with that and how to do that well in the team. What sort of principles or what sort of frameworks do you use around that?
Yeah, I believe in more touch points. So I do two things, Jonah. So one is with my extended team. So I have a 1 hour check-in. So no agenda, no preparation. It's just check-in. How did the week go? Anything we need to keep in mind for what's for the upcoming week? Are there
Yeah.
any quick updates? So I get my cross-functional team together for an hour on a Friday morning. Uh, Informal check-in, right? We share updates. We talk. You don't. Nobody needs to come prepared for that. You just need to show up for the meeting. And
Yes.
then I try to do a regular one-on-one with my direct reports, and some of the key stakeholders. The frequency of
Hmm.
that depends. Sometimes it is once a week. Sometimes it is twice a week. But again, you don't want it to be too frequent as well, because you run out of things to talk about, right? But
Yes.
I think with the direct reports, it should at least be once a month, if not once in 2 weeks, right? And I
Yes.
feel that creating that space, even if it is half an hour, I think it is important. Those are the touch points that I have, Jono, with my direct team and with my broader team as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's brilliant. And I think a lot of people underestimate how doing that sort of that weekly 1 hour without an agenda can be. It's easy for some people to go, oh, it's not that important. We need to actually do X, Y, or Z instead. And it's like, well, actually, that check-in it actually stops so many problems. It provides solutions so often. And I know it sounds simple, but I see so many leaders who one of the things that they let go of too quickly is they don't prioritize the time they spend in teams and one-on-one. And it's from a good heart. It's because we've all been in terrible meetings that have been really unhelpful. But I love your intentionality around that. And I'm a big believer in having those spaces where you don't have an agenda, where you're able to really, as a team, just check in with each other. And so that was great. Thanks for sharing that. What about work-life balance? What does that look like for you? How do you manage a role like the role you're in with the rest of your life? What are your thoughts on that, Rajit?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, work-life balance. I think it is. I'll be very honest. It is challenging. It is not easy. And my wife works as well. She is a professor in one of the universities in the Boston area, and she has a very successful career on her own. We
Yes.
have two kids, and it is hard, and it is harder. My kids are a little bit older now; they are 15 and 10. So, but when they were young, it was really, really difficult. I think it starts with, I would say, a couple of things, right? So one is
Mm.
you have, depending upon the life stage, you have to make sure that you are setting boundaries, right? What you will compromise, what you will not compromise, right? Like an
Yes.
example could be, and like one thing I've always liked about J&J is that they work with you. So if I say that, look, from 3 to 5 every afternoon, and I'm just giving an example,
Yeah.
I have to be home to take care of my kids, but I'll get the work done after 5. uh, I think there's an organizational flexibility to enable that, right? And that helps. So setting your boundaries and saying, hey, I can travel, but you know what, I cannot travel on Thursdays for whatever reason.
Yes.
My son has a soccer game or whatever. So I think it starts with setting the boundaries. It starts with making sure that people have, you work with your spouse or your partner in terms of how do you support each other, and making sure that you are there for them and they are there for you, but you're also working together on how do you raise your kids. Also tapping into the it takes a village to raise a kid, as they say, right? So
Yes.
we have tapped into support structure, whether family, friends, or daycare and things like that. But look,
Yes.
work life balance, I think, is, I'm not sure there is always a balance. There are sometimes you ultimately you find that balance, but I think you have to be intentional. It is not easy, especially when the kids are young. But for people who are listening, it is doable, right? I
Yeah.
think you have to just set boundaries. You have to be disciplined. You have to be intentional, and it is hard, but it is manageable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really well put. And I think sometimes we need to be a bit more realistic with our expectations, that it's not always going to be this perfect balance, but there are going to be seasons where it's challenging, and combine that, like you
Correct.
said, with some great boundaries. I'm reminded of one of my favorite stories I've ever heard around this topic, which just came to mind as we're chatting about this, and you talked about doing family and maybe saying I can travel but not on Thursdays because my son has a soccer match. Or I remember hearing a story from about Stephen Covey, who wrote the Seven Habits of
Yeah.
Highly Effective People, and it was a story from one of his daughters from when she was growing up, and he took her on a work trip and said, "You know what? I've got this one." I've got this one sort of speaking engagement, and then after that we're going to go out for ice cream. And she was pretty little. I think maybe sort of around 10, I think, from memory. And so they're at this conference. Stephen speaks, and as they're on their way out, he runs into, as he's out on his way out of the conference, runs into this person who and some other colleagues from this organization that would have been a really big fish. Could have been a really great, or it just she reflects going, it was obvious that this could have been a really great opportunity for her dad, and so she just thought, she just assumed, oh no, we're probably, because they said, you should, why don't you and your daughter come and join us for dinner, and since you're in the area, and she thought, oh well, that's probably what we'll be doing. But he said to them, I'm so sorry, I can't. We've already got a we've got a daddy-daughter date sort of booked. We're going to go and get ice cream, and so I need to go and do that. And I just remember her telling that story as such a great example of having those clear boundaries. And I'm sure he wasn't doing that every day, right? But it was the fact that he was intentional, and when he made this intentional decision, and there was a trade-off, and he said no to going out with this with these guys. But it was interesting that his daughter remembered that decades later, and it was something she reflected on, I think, actually around the time that he passed away. So
yeah, and kids remember things, right? And that is so important, to find time to spend time with kids, because they notice little things, right? So I think, it's, we all learn, right? But what he did was the right thing, right? And his daughter remembers, and she will remember it for the rest of her life, right? And that sent a message that, look, no matter what, you are the most important, right?
Yes,
which is how it should be. Kids are the most important, right? But these are these little moments that really makes a big impression, and we all need to be very intentional about it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I also appreciate how you've talked about authentic leadership. What does it look like to be an authentic leader, and what is authentic leadership to you, Rajit?
Yeah, it is about being your true self. And I'll give you an example, Joe, right? When I came to the US, I, I tried fitting in. And when I say fitting in, I was trying to be like others, right? So
Yeah.
I grew up in India. I love cricket, right? I love
Yes.
Bollywood. But when I will be with colleagues, I will pretend that I like American football, or I like, Hollywood movies. And I very quickly realized that I was just not being myself, right?
Mm.
And uh, and now, when people say, what sports do you follow, I say, look, I love cricket, and I see American football, and my son, my kids have grown up here, they're obviously big fan, right? But my
Yes.
love is still cricket. I mean, that's the game that I love, right? I love Bollywood movies, and
Yeah.
so I think I have now come to a point where I am more comfortable being sharing with people who I am, and what I have seen is that people receive that better than me trying to pretend to be who I'm not, right?
Mm.
So sometimes we walk into a room and we try to be different than who we are because we are trying to blend in, right? And there is
Yes.
something about trying to fit in. I think there's a value to that.
Mm.
But if you are in a place where who you are is not welcome, is not acceptable, then you are in the wrong place, right? So I think authenticity is about, being yourself, right?
Yes.
Being vulnerable, being open, and I think that is important. And I feel leaders who pretend to be who they are not, uh, are not, they will not be happy with themselves, and that manifests in the way they react and interact with the team, right? So I think being open to who you are, and look, there could be places where you go and talk, and people, you feel like you are not welcome just because of who you are. You are just in the wrong place. Find some other place, right? But I
Mm.
think authenticity is just being yourself and being comfortable with who you are. But more importantly, in a workplace, finding a workplace where you are welcome, right? Who you are is welcome and celebrated, right? So I think that's what authenticity is for me. And some of that comes with, I have some gray hairs now, Jonah, right? And I think that's how you learn through that experience, where I'm more comfortable being who I am.
Yeah.
than I was, say, maybe 15 years back when I was trying to pretend to be who I was not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, Rajit. I really like how you said that, and also can't help but just echo the love for cricket. As an Australian, I was this morning just watching
Well,
some highlights.
congratulations for
Yeah,
the game
that's
last
right.
night. Yeah,
It was.
congratulations. I actually watched the game live. I was
Oh,
watching
did
it
you
live.
really?
I thought,
Uh,
yeah, I thought you guys were going to lose, but then Matthew Wade was unbelievable. I mean,
yeah, I was so
and Mark
happy for
Stone,
him.
they're unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, all the best for the finals, All the best for the finals. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a for those who don't follow cricket. If you want to get a little taste of it, look up the highlights of Australia versus Pakistan. That's what's just
Pakistan.
happened overnight. We're talking about in the 2020 World Cup. Yeah, it was the T20 World Cup. Yes, but it's so true about just being being authentic. I think one of my favorite ideas that I think I've mentioned on the podcast before, but it's a bit of an exaggeration. But I think there's a lot of truth in it. Is this idea that the best leader in the room is the silliest person in the room, and it sounds like a strange thought, but the thinking behind it is that when you meet great leaders, you there's something that they have in common, which is they don't mind. They're not afraid to look silly. They're not so profoundly worried about um, fitting in, like you said. And I think that's why it's an exaggeration. Obviously, the best leaders aren't dressing up as clowns everywhere, but there is something really profound about being willing to ask a silly question and being willing to say in a culture where everyone loves American football, and to be the one that stands out and say, you know what, for me, my love is cricket. I grew up loving cricket. I love it. That's what I love. And I think that's definitely been very true for me. The more I've embraced not worrying about looking silly and just being myself, the better I've been able to connect with others, and I think it's really helped me in my leadership as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up now, did you have any final thoughts that you want to give listeners, Rajit?
No, look, I have really enjoyed this conversation, Jono. As I mentioned to you at the beginning of our conversation, this is an area of passion and interest for me. One of my business school professors, he said something that has always stuck with me. Two things, right? So one he said was, as a manager, you have responsibility. And the point he was making is, if somebody on your team, you don't treat them well, they don't feel respected, when they go home, they will inevitably snap at their partner or their kids, right? If you don't treat
Yes.
people well, you're not only making one person unhappy, you're making the whole family unhappy, right? And just think about, if you have 10 people, 15 people working for you now, how you behave, how you act impacts happiness of 60 people, right? And the bigger your
Yes.
team, the larger the impact you have, right? So
Yes.
leadership is a responsibility. And how you treat people, as a leader, if I run into somebody and I don't say hello to them, even if I don't mean, I might be caught in my own thoughts, or a leader might be caught in their own thoughts. People will be like, oh my god, what did I do, right? So being intentional, making sure that you treat people with respect is so important. So as a leader, one has a big responsibility. And the other thing was, when you interact with somebody, the definition of was that a good interaction is when both people walk away feeling good about themselves.
Yeah.
And that does not mean you cannot have a difficult conversation. You can have a difficult conversation, but throughout that, people should feel that they are being valued and they are being respected. So I think, leadership, I think, is a privilege, but it comes with significant responsibility. And as leaders, you make big impact in lives, happiness, career of people and their families as well. And once you see that through that lens, you just need to make sure that you take that responsibility seriously. So I am glad you're doing this, Jono. I think, and spreading the word about what good leadership looks like. But yeah, I think those were the things that I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful way to wrap up. Thank you, Rajit. Well, thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. And I really believe I've just thoroughly enjoyed today's conversation as we've talked about authentic leadership. We've talked about diversity. I think Rajit shared some stories that are just, just incredible and vulnerable. And I think I know that our listeners will have gotten a lot out of that. So thank you for listening. And also a big thank you again to Rajit Kamal. Thank you again, Rajit, for coming on the podcast.
Juno, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and all the best with the finals on Sunday for the T20 World Cup. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Rajit.
Yeah. All right.
You too.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me. Well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jono White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out John O. White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.